The massive doors of the Galactic Council chamber opened with a deep rumble that echoed through the vast hall. Commander Jake Harrison walked through those doors knowing his next few minutes would decide the fate of every human in the galaxy. Behind him followed Dr. Amy Carter, her tablet clutched tightly in her hands as she reviewed the galactic laws one final time. The chamber itself was a marvel of alien engineering, with seats arranged in concentric circles that rose toward a domed ceiling made of some translucent material that shifted colors with the light. Representatives from 47 different species filled those seats, their various forms creating a bizarre tapestry of life from across the galaxy. Some floated in environmental suits filled with methane, others required special heating lamps to maintain their body temperature, and a few needed gravity adjusters to prevent their massive forms from crushing the furniture. Despite their differences, they all shared one thing in common today. They were here to witness what many believed would be the end of human expansion into galactic space. At the center of the chamber sat the chief arbitrator, a being that resembled a massive jellyfish, with tentacles that pulsed with bioluminescent patterns. Its species had served as neutral judges for over 3,000 years, and their decisions were considered final throughout the galaxy. The arbitrator's voice came through universal translators, creating a strange harmony of tones that seemed to speak directly into the minds of all present. "Commander Harrison of the Human Colonial Defense Force," the arbitrator announced, "you stand before this council to answer charges brought by the Zephyrian Empire. They claim your species has violated 17 different galactic peace treaties and poses a direct threat to the stability of our civilization." Jake stood at attention, his uniform crisp and his bearing proud despite the gravity of the situation. He had spent 20 years in the military, rising through the ranks not through political connections, but through demonstrated competence in impossible situations. His graying hair and weathered face told the story of countless battles fought in the dark spaces between stars. But his eyes remained sharp and focused. The Zephyrian delegation occupied an entire section of the chamber, their reptilian forms imposing even while seated. Their ambassador rose from his position, his scales shifting from deep blue to angry red as he prepared to speak. The creature stood nearly 8 feet tall, with arms that ended in claws capable of rending steel and a jaw filled with teeth that could crush bone. When he spoke, his voice carried the authority of an empire that had conquered dozens of worlds. "Humans spread across the galaxy like a plague," the ambassador declared, his words translated with mechanical precision. "They establish colonies without permission, extract resources from worlds that belong to other species, and show no respect for the ancient laws that have maintained peace for millennia. They are a young species with no understanding of their place in the galactic order." Amy leaned forward slightly, her fingers dancing across her tablet as she accessed legal precedents and treaty documents. She had spent the last 5 years studying galactic law, becoming one of the few humans who truly understood the complex web of agreements and traditions that governed interstellar relations. Her knowledge would be crucial in the coming confrontation, but she feared it might not be enough. Furthermore, the ambassador continued, they refuse to acknowledge the authority of established species and insist on negotiating as equals, despite having achieved interstellar travel only 2 centuries ago. Their arrogance knows no bounds, and their aggressive expansion threatens the stability of our entire region of space. Jake listened to the accusations without visible reaction, though Amy could see the tension in his shoulders. Some of the charges were fair, others were exaggerated, and a few were outright lies. The truth was that humanity had indeed been aggressive in their expansion, but it was the aggression of a species that had learned the hard way that the universe was not a friendly place. The arbitrator's tentacles swirled in a pattern that indicated consideration. "What response does humanity offer to these charges?" Jake stepped forward, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustics. "Honored arbitrator, humanity acknowledges that we have made mistakes in our expansion into galactic space. We are a young species, as the ambassador correctly states, and we have much to learn about the traditions and laws that govern civilized interaction between species. The Zephyrian ambassador's scales shifted to a deeper red, interpreting Jake's words as weakness. This was exactly the response he had hoped for, a human admission of guilt. That would make the coming challenge even more satisfying. However, Jake continued, we dispute the characterization of our actions as deliberate violations of galactic law. In every case cited by the Zephyrian Empire, humans were acting in response to direct threats to our colonies or our people. We have never initiated hostilities, and we have always sought peaceful resolution to conflicts when possible. The chamber erupted in a cacophony of sounds as different species expressed their opinions through their various forms of communication. Some clicked their mandibles in approval, others released pheromones that indicated skepticism, and a few simply growled their displeasure. The arbitrator waited patiently for the noise to subside before continuing. The Zephyrian Empire has invoked their right to settle this dispute through trial by combat, the arbitrator announced. Under the ancient laws of the Galactic Council, they may choose a champion to face a representative of humanity in the arena of judgment. The winner of this combat will determine the fate of the human species in galactic space. Amy felt her heart sink. She had hoped the Zephyrians would choose diplomatic arbitration or economic sanctions, both of which could be negotiated and managed. Trial by combat was different. It was final, absolute, and heavily favored species with natural weapons and superior physical capabilities. The Zephyrian champion stepped forward from the delegation. Crixval was a perfect specimen of his species, bred and trained specifically for combat. His scales were darker than those of the ambassador, indicating his warrior caste, and his claws had been sharpened to razor edges. Scars across his arms and chest told the story of countless battles, and his eyes held the cold calculation of a professional killer. I accept the challenge on behalf of humanity, Jake said without hesitation, despite Amy's sharp intake of breath. Beside him, the arbitrator's tentacles pulsed in a rhythm that indicated formal proceedings. The combat will take place in the arena of judgment according to the ancient rules. No weapons of any kind may be brought into the arena. Only materials found within the combat zone may be used. The combat continues until one participant yields or is unable to continue. Amy grabbed Jake's arm, her voice urgent but quiet. Jake, this is suicide. Look at that thing. It's a living weapon. You don't stand a chance in hand-to-hand combat. Jake looked down at her with a slight smile. Who said anything about hand-to-hand combat? The arbitrator continued the formal pronouncement. The human representative will have 72 hours to prepare according to galactic law. The combat will take place at dawn on the fourth day. Are the terms acceptable to both parties? Both Jake and the Zephyrian champion nodded their agreement. The chamber fell silent as the weight of the moment settled over everyone present. In 72 hours, the fate of humanity would be decided by a single combat between a middle-aged human soldier and a genetically enhanced alien warrior in an arena where no weapons were allowed. As the formal session ended and the various delegations began to file out of the chamber, Amy remained close to Jake's side. What are you planning? She asked quietly. Jake watched the Zephyrian champion as he left the chamber, noting the creature's confident stride and the way other species moved aside to let him pass. I'm planning to win, he said simply. How? Amy pressed. You can't match his strength, speed, or natural weapons. The arena rules specifically prohibit bringing in any equipment or weapons. Jake's smile widened slightly. Amy, in all your research into galactic law, did you ever come across any rules about what you can do with the materials that are already in the arena? Amy paused, her mind racing through the legal documents she had memorized. No, the laws only specify what cannot be brought in. They don't restrict the use of materials found within the combat zone. Then I suggest we spend the next 72 hours learning everything we can about the arena of judgment, Jake said. Every rock, every piece of metal, every environmental feature. If I can't bring weapons into the arena, then I'll just have to make the arena itself into a weapon. As they walked out of the chamber together, Amy began to understand why Jake had been chosen to represent humanity in this crucial moment. While others saw an impossible challenge, he saw an engineering problem waiting to be solved. The human diplomatic vessel hung in space like a metal island surrounded by the vast darkness between stars. Inside the ship's main briefing room, Jake Harrison sat at the head of a metal table while his team gathered around him. The room was small and cramped by human standards, but it had been home to this group of specialists for the past 3 years as they worked to establish humanity's place in the galactic community. Chief Engineer Ben Mitchell paced back and forth along one wall, his hands moving constantly as he spoke. Ben had served with Jake for 15 years, and his ability to solve technical problems under pressure had saved their lives more times than either man could count. His weathered face showed the strain of their current situation, and his voice carried the frustration of an engineer who could see no logical solution to their problem. "Jake, I've run the numbers a dozen different ways and they all come out the same," Ben said, stopping his pacing to lean against the wall. "That Zephyrian champion is 3 times your weight, has natural armor that can stop small arms fire, and claws that can cut through steel plating. In a straight fight, you'll last maybe 30 seconds before he tears you apart." Dr. Amy Carter looked up from her tablet, where she had been reviewing footage from previous Arena of Judgment battles. Her background in xenobiology and galactic law made her the team's expert on alien cultures and their fighting methods. What she had discovered in the historical records was not encouraging for their chances. "The statistics are even worse than Ben suggests," Amy said, her voice quiet but steady. "The Zephyrian Empire has participated in 43 arena combats over the past 2 centuries. They have won 42 of them. The only loss was to a species called the Vrex, who are essentially living rocks with the ability to regenerate. Lost limbs." Lieutenant Lisa Hayes sat at the communications console, monitoring the diplomatic channels for any updates on the upcoming combat. She had joined the team 2 years ago, fresh from the academy, and her youth and enthusiasm often provided a different perspective on their problems. Today, however, even her optimism was struggling against the harsh reality of their situation. "The betting odds are running 1,000 to 1 against us," Lisa reported, her fingers dancing across the communication controls. "Most of the other species aren't even taking bets anymore. They consider it a foregone conclusion." Jake listened to his team's concerns without interruption, his fingers steepled in front of him as he considered their options. He had learned long ago that the best solutions often came from understanding problems from multiple angles, and his team's expertise covered all the technical aspects of their situation. "Show me the arena footage again," Jake said. Gesturing toward the main display screen, Amy activated the holographic projector, and the room filled with a 3-dimensional representation of the Arena of Judgment. The structure was ancient, carved from living rock by some long-extinct species and modified over the centuries to accommodate the needs of different cultures. The main fighting area was a circular pit about 200 feet in diameter, surrounded by walls that rose 50 feet to the spectator galleries above. "The arena floor is made of compressed stone and metal," Amy explained, highlighting different sections of the display. "There are several rock formations scattered throughout, ranging from small boulders to formations large enough to provide cover for a human-sized combatant. The metal debris comes from previous battles where weapons were destroyed or combatants were killed." Jake studied the display carefully, his eyes moving from one feature to another as he built a mental map of the space. "What about the water features?" "There are 3 pools of water fed by an underground spring system," Amy continued. "The water is about 3 feet deep at the center, and flows out through drainage channels that were carved into the arena floor thousands of years ago. The original builders used the water to wash away blood and debris after each combat." Ben stopped his pacing to look at the display more closely. "The structural integrity of those rock formations looks questionable. See how they're balanced. On relatively small foundation stones? A good engineer could probably bring them down with the right application of force." Jake nodded, his mind already working through the possibilities. "What about the metal debris? Any idea what it's made of?" The spectral analysis shows it's mostly standard hull plating from various starships, Amy replied. Some of it is quite old, probably from the early days of galactic civilization. The metal is strong, but not particularly advanced by current standards. Lisa looked up from her console with a puzzled expression. Commander, I don't understand what you're thinking. Even if you could use the rocks and metal somehow, you're still facing an opponent who could probably lift a small starship. Jake smiled for the first time since they had left the council chamber. Lisa, you're thinking like a soldier. In a soldier's world, you win fights by being stronger or faster or better armed than your opponent. But I'm not a soldier anymore. I'm an engineer, and engineers solve problems by changing the rules of the game. Amy leaned forward, her scientific mind beginning to grasp the direction of Jake's thoughts. You're planning to use the arena itself. As a weapon somehow, not just a weapon, Jake corrected. I'm going to turn the entire arena into a trap. The Zephyrian champion is expecting a fight, but what he's going to get is a carefully orchestrated demonstration of human engineering principles. Ben's expression changed from frustration to professional interest. You're talking about using the existing materials to create mechanical systems. Levers, pulleys, controlled collapses, that sort of thing. Exactly, Jake said. The arena rules say I can't bring weapons in, but they don't say anything about what I can do with the materials that are already there. I have 72 hours to study every rock, every piece of metal, every drop of water in that arena. By the time I'm done, I'll know exactly how to make it all work together. Amy pulled up additional footage from previous battles, her fingers moving quickly across the tablet surface. The preparation period allows for a full inspection of the arena. Combatants are permitted to examine the fighting area for up to 6 hours before the battle begins. Most warriors use this time for meditation or physical conditioning. I'm going to use it for engineering, Jake said. Ben, I need you to analyze the structural weak points in every rock formation. Amy, I need you to map the water flow patterns and calculate how they might be redirected. Lisa, I need you to monitor the Zephyrian Champion's preparation activities and report any intelligence that might be useful. The team spent the next several hours poring over the arena schematics and battle footage. Jake's plan began to take shape as they identified potential trigger points, calculated force vectors, and mapped out the complex interactions between the various environmental features. The beauty of this approach, Jake explained as they worked, is that the Zephyrian champion will never see it coming. His entire species thinks in terms of direct confrontation. They've been winning arena battles for centuries by relying on their superior physical capabilities. They have no concept of using the environment as a weapon. Ben looked up from his calculations with a grin. You know, Jake, this might actually work. If we can time everything correctly, we could have the entire arena working against him before he even realizes what's happening. Amy's tablet chimed with an incoming message from the Galactic Council. The formal preparation period begins in 6 hours, she announced. The arena will be sealed except for the inspection period you're allowed. Jake stood up from the table and stretched, his joints popping after hours of sitting and planning. Then I suggest we all get some rest. Tomorrow we start building the most complex trap in galactic history, and we'll only have one chance to get it right. As the team dispersed to their quarters, Jake remained in the briefing room, staring at the holographic display of the arena. In less than 3 days he would face an opponent who was superior to him in every physical measure that mattered. But Jake had something the Zephyrian champion didn't have: the accumulated knowledge of a species that had spent millennia learning to overcome impossible odds through intelligence, creativity, and stubborn refusal to accept defeat. The arena was about to become a classroom, and Jake Harrison was going to teach the galaxy a lesson about underestimating human ingenuity. The transport shuttle descended through the thin atmosphere of the arena world, its engines humming quietly as it approached the ancient structure that would determine humanity's fate. Jake Harrison sat in the passenger compartment, his eyes closed as he reviewed the plans one final time in his mind. Every calculation had been checked and rechecked, every measurement verified against the historical records. and every possible failure point identified and addressed. The arena of judgment stood on a barren plain of red rock, its circular walls rising from the ground like the rim of an ancient crater. The structure had been built by a species that had vanished from the galaxy over 10,000 years ago, leaving behind only this monument to their belief that disputes should be settled through combat rather than endless negotiation. Over the centuries, dozens of different species had used the arena to resolve their conflicts, and the bones of countless warriors lay buried beneath its stone floor. Amy Carter sat across from Jake in the shuttle, her tablet displaying the final environmental scans they had conducted from orbit. The arena's internal structure matched their expectations almost perfectly, with only minor variations that actually worked in their favor. The water flow patterns were exactly as predicted. The rock formations showed the expected stress points, and the metal debris was distributed in a way that would support their planned mechanical systems. The inspection period begins in 1 hour, Amy said, checking the chronometer on her wrist. You'll have 6 hours to examine the arena and make your preparations. The Zephyrian champion has already completed his inspection and is currently in meditation. Jake opened his eyes and looked out the shuttle's viewport at the arena below. What did their champion do during his inspection? According to the observers, he spent most of his time practicing combat techniques and testing the grip surfaces on the rocks, Amy replied. He also examined the metal debris to see if any pieces could be used as improvised weapons, but he discarded that idea when he realized the pieces were too heavy for effective use in combat. The shuttle touched down on the landing platform adjacent to the arena, and Jake gathered his equipment for the inspection. The galactic rules allowed him to bring measurement tools and recording devices, but nothing that could be used as a weapon or left behind in the arena. He carried a small toolkit containing basic instruments, a portable scanner for analyzing material composition, and a recording device to document his observations. The arena's entrance was a tunnel that led from the landing platform to the fighting area below. Ancient symbols covered the walls, carved by species that had participated in combat over the millennia. Jake recognized some of the markings from Amy's research, but many others remained mysteries even to the galaxy's most skilled archaeologists. The tunnel opened into the arena proper, and Jake stepped onto the stone floor that had witnessed countless battles. The space was larger than it had appeared in the holographic displays, with the circular walls rising steeply on all sides to the spectator galleries above. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the floor, creating pools of darkness that would disappear when the artificial lighting system activated for the combat. Jake began his inspection at the arena's center, using his scanner to analyze the composition of the floor stones. As expected, the surface was made of compressed rock and metal fragments, created by thousands of years of repairs and modifications. The material was strong enough to support the weight of massive combatants, but it could be fractured with the right application of force. Moving methodically across the arena, Jake examined each of the rock formations in detail. The largest formation stood near the eastern wall, a collection of boulders and stone slabs that rose nearly 20 feet above the arena floor. His scanner revealed that the entire structure was held in place by 3 key foundation stones, each carefully positioned to distribute the weight of the rocks. Above. Jake knelt beside the largest foundation stone and ran his hands over its surface, feeling for the natural stress points that his calculations had predicted. The stone was old and weathered, with hairline cracks that had developed over centuries of temperature changes and seismic activity. With careful manipulation, those cracks could be widened just enough to weaken the stone's structural integrity. Working quickly but carefully, Jake began to modify the rock formation. To any observer, his actions would appear to be routine examination of the arena's features. In reality, he was creating a controlled demolition system that would activate when the right pressure was applied to specific trigger points. He removed small stones from crucial positions, loosened others just enough to make them unstable, and created a cascade effect that would bring down the entire formation in a predetermined pattern. The metal debris scattered throughout the arena required a different approach. Jake identified several pieces of hull plating and structural supports that could be repositioned to create mechanical advantage systems. A long piece of curved metal became a leva arm, while a cylindrical section from an old engine housing became a fulcrum. By carefully adjusting the positions of these components, Jake created a series of interconnected mechanisms that would multiply the force of any impact applied to them. The most complex part of his preparation involved the arena's water systems. The three pools were connected by underground channels that followed the natural contours of the rock beneath the arena floor. Jake discovered that the original builders had created a sophisticated drainage system that could be manipulated by repositioning certain stones and clearing blocked passages. Jake spent 2 hours working on the water systems, crawling through narrow spaces between the rocks and feeling along the edges of the pools for the hidden channels. The work was physically demanding, but his years of military service had kept him in excellent condition despite his age. More importantly, his engineering background allowed him to understand how the water would flow under different conditions, and how that flow could be controlled by moving several key stones and clearing debris from specific channels. Jake created a water redirection system that would activate when triggered by the right sequence of events. The system would remain dormant until the proper conditions were met. Then it would channel all the arena's water into a single powerful current that could sweep away even a creature as massive as the Zephyrian champion. As the hours passed, Jake's preparations became increasingly subtle. He was no longer moving large rocks or repositioning major pieces of debris. Instead, he was making tiny adjustments to the systems he had already created, fine-tuning the mechanical interactions and ensuring that every component would function exactly as planned. The final element of his preparation involved creating what appeared to be random scatter patterns throughout the arena. Jake placed small stones and metal fragments in specific locations, creating pathways that would guide his opponent's movements during the combat. To any observer, these appeared to be natural distributions of debris, but they were actually carefully planned routes that would lead the Zephyrian champion through the trigger zones of Jake's traps. As the inspection period drew to a close, Jake stood in the center of the arena and surveyed his work. To anyone watching from the spectator galleries, the arena looked exactly as it had before his inspection began. The rock formations appeared stable, the metal debris seemed randomly scattered, and the water pools showed no signs of modification. But Jake knew better. He had transformed the entire arena into a complex machine, with every rock, every piece of metal, and every drop of water serving a specific purpose in his overall strategy. The Zephyrian champion would enter the arena expecting a simple hand-to-hand combat, but he would instead face an environment that had been engineered to defeat him. Jake walked back toward the tunnel entrance, his mind already shifting from preparation to execution. In less than 18 hours, he would return to this arena to face an opponent who possessed every physical advantage imaginable. But Jake had something more valuable than strength or speed or natural weapons. He had the accumulated knowledge of a species that had learned to survive by outthinking their problems rather than overpowering them. The arena was ready. And so was Jake Harrison. Dawn broke over the arena world with a pale orange light that cast long shadows across the ancient stone structure. The spectator galleries filled rapidly as representatives from dozens of species arrived to witness what most believed would be a quick and decisive victory for the Zephyrian Empire. The betting had reached astronomical levels, with some wealthy traders wagering entire star systems on the outcome of the combat. Jake Harrison stood in the preparation chamber beneath the arena, checking his equipment one final time. He wore simple combat fatigues with reinforced padding at the knees and elbows, clothing designed for mobility rather than protection. His boots had special gripping solace that would provide traction on the wet stone surfaces he expected to encounter during the battle. Around his waist was a utility belt containing only items that had been approved by the arena officials, a water container, basic medical supplies, and a small knife for cutting fabric or rope. Amy Carter paced nervously in the small chamber, her tablet displaying real-time data from the arena's environmental systems. The artificial lighting had been activated, eliminating the shadows that had provided concealment during Jake's preparation period. The arena floor was clearly visible to the thousands of spectators gathering in the galleries above, and every detail of the coming combat would be recorded for broadcast throughout the galaxy. "The atmospheric conditions are perfect," Amy reported, though her voice carried little enthusiasm. "Humidity is low, temperature is stable, and there's no wind to affect projectile trajectories. Of course, that assumes you actually have any projectiles to throw." Jake smiled and placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Amy, I've been throwing rocks since I was 6 years old. Trust me, I know how to hit what I'm aiming at." The chamber's communication system crackled to life, carrying the voice of the chief arbitrator from the arena above. "Combatants will enter the arena in 5 minutes. All preparation activities must cease immediately." Through the chamber's viewing port, Jake could see the Zephyrian champion in his own preparation area across the arena complex. Crixvol stood motionless in the center of his chamber, his scales shifting through different colors as he performed what appeared to be a ritual. Meditation? The alien warrior's claws had been sharpened to razor edges, and his muscular frame showed the results of decades of intensive physical training. "Ben." Mitchell's voice came through the communication link from the human observation area. "Jake, I've been monitoring the structural sensors throughout the arena. Everything you modified yesterday is still in place and ready to activate. The Zephyrians haven't detected any of your preparations." "Good," Jake replied. "Remember, once the combat begins, you won't be able to communicate with me. If something goes wrong, don't try to interfere. The arena rules are absolute, and any outside assistance will result in automatic disqualification." Lisa Hayes added her voice to the communication link. "Commander, I've been monitoring the galactic news feeds. This combat is being broadcast. Live to over 300 worlds. Everyone in the galaxy is watching." Jake nodded, though he felt no additional pressure from the knowledge that billions of beings would witness the coming battle. He had faced impossible odds before, in public. Attention had never affected his ability to focus on the task at hand. If anything, the widespread broadcast would ensure that the galaxy understood exactly how humans approached problems that seemed unsolvable. The chamber's exit door began to open with a mechanical grinding sound that echoed through the stone corridors. Jake took a deep breath and stepped toward the tunnel that led to the arena floor. Behind him, Amy whispered a quiet prayer to whatever gods might be listening. While Ben and Lisa monitored their instruments from the observation area above, the tunnel stretched for nearly 100 feet, its walls covered with the carved symbols of species that had participated in arena combat over the millennia. Jake walked slowly, using the time to center his thoughts and review his strategy one final time. Every step had been planned, every movement calculated, and every possible contingency considered. The success of his plan depended on precise timing and perfect execution. With no room for error or hesitation, the tunnel opened into the arena proper, and Jake stepped onto the stone floor to the sound of thousands of alien voices expressing their opinions through clicks, growls, and other forms of communication. The spectator galleries rose on all sides, filled with beings whose technology and civilization span millions of years of galactic history. Despite their differences, they all shared a common belief that they were about to witness the end of human expansion into their space. Across the arena, Crixvol emerged from his own tunnel with a roar that echoed off the stone walls. The Zephyrian champion stood nearly 8 feet tall, his dark scales reflecting the artificial lighting as he moved with the fluid grace of a natural predator. His claws scraped against the stone floor as he took his position, and his yellow eyes fixed on Jake with the cold calculation of a professional killer. The chief arbitrator's voice boomed across the arena from speakers hidden in the walls. "Combatants have entered the arena of judgment. The ancient laws will govern this contest. No weapons may be used except those fashioned from materials found within the arena itself. Combat continues until one participant yields or is rendered unable to continue. Are both combatants ready?" Jake raised his hand to indicate his readiness, his eyes scanning the arena floor to confirm that all his preparations remained in place. The rock formations stood exactly as he had left them. The metal debris was positioned correctly, and the water pools showed no signs of disturbance. Everything was ready for the most complex engineering demonstration in galactic history. Crixval responded with another roar that conveyed his eagerness to begin the combat. The Zephyrian champion had participated in 17 previous arena battles, winning each one through a combination of superior strength, speed, and ruthless tactical thinking. He had studied recordings of human combat techniques and was confident that his natural advantages would ensure victory. Within minutes of the battle's start, the arbitrator's tentacles pulsed in the pattern that indicated formal commencement. Let the combat begin. Crixval immediately launched himself forward with explosive speed, his powerful legs propelling his massive frame across the arena floor in a direct charge toward Jake's position. The alien warrior's strategy was simple and brutal. Close the distance as quickly as possible and use his superior reach and strength to overwhelm his opponent before any tricks could be employed. But Jake was already moving. Instead of retreating or attempting to meet the charge head-on, he ran directly toward the eastern wall of the arena, following a path he had carefully planned during his preparation period. His route took him past specific trigger points and through predetermined zones where his trap systems would activate in sequence. Crixval adjusted his charge to intercept Jake's movement, his claws extended and ready to strike. The Zephyrian champion's experience told him that humans often tried to use their agility to avoid direct confrontation, but the arena's circular design made it impossible to run indefinitely. Eventually, the human would be cornered, and the combat would end. Jake reached the first trigger point and stepped precisely on a small stone he had positioned during his preparation. The stone shifted under his weight, activating a carefully balanced system that had been invisible to casual observation. A section of the arena wall that appeared to be solid stone suddenly swung inward, revealing a hidden alcove that Jake had discovered in the ancient drainage system. The movement caught Crixval by surprise, but he quickly adapted his charge to follow Jake into what appeared to be a dead-end trap. The Zephyrian champion's confidence increased as he realized his opponent had cornered himself in a space too small for effective maneuvering, but as Crixval entered the alcove, Jake triggered the second phase of his plan. A concealed lever mechanism, created from repositioned metal debris, activated when the alien warrior's weight pressed down on a specific floor stone. The alcove's rear wall suddenly opened, revealing another passage that led back into the main arena through a route that Crixval could not follow due to his larger size. Jake emerged from the passage behind his opponent's original position, having used the arena's hidden architecture to reverse their relative positions. The spectators erupted in surprised sounds as they began to realize that the human had somehow prepared the arena itself to assist in his strategy. Crixval spun around with a roar of frustration, his yellow eyes now showing the first hints of uncertainty. The combat was not proceeding according to his expectations, and the human's behavior suggested a level of preparation that the Zephyrian champion had not anticipated. Jake stood near the center of the arena, his breathing steady despite the sprint through the hidden passages. He gestured toward the largest rock formation with a slight smile. Your move. Crixval charged across the arena floor with renewed fury, his claws scraping against the stone as he built momentum for what he intended to be the final assault. The Zephyrian champion had grown tired of the human's tricks and games, and his warrior instincts demanded a direct confrontation that would showcase his superior physical capabilities. His powerful legs propelled him forward at incredible speed, covering the distance between himself and Jake in mere seconds. Jake waited until the last possible moment before moving, his eyes focused not on his approaching opponent but on a specific point near the large rock formation where he had spent hours during his preparation period. As Crixval closed the final few feet, Jake dove to his left and rolled behind a cluster of smaller stones, leading the Zephyrian champion directly into the primary trigger zone of his most elaborate trap. The alien warrior's momentum carried him past Jake's position and brought his full weight down on the carefully prepared foundation stone that held the entire rock formation in place. The ancient stone, weakened by Jake's precise modifications, cracked under the massive impact and shifted, just enough to destabilize the delicate balance that had held the rock pile stable for centuries. What happened next unfolded with the inexorable logic of physics and engineering. The foundation stone's failure caused a cascade effect that rippled through the entire rock formation, bringing down tons of carefully balanced stone in a controlled avalanche that Jake had calculated to the pound. The spectators in the galleries above gasped in amazement as the arena's most prominent feature collapsed in a thunderous roar of falling rock and dust. Crixval barely escaped being crushed by the falling stones, his natural reflexes allowing him to leap clear of the main collapse zone. But Jake's engineering had accounted for the Zephyrian's superior agility, and the rockfall was designed not to trap his opponent but to drive him toward the next phase of the trap system. The alien warrior landed heavily near the arena center, his scales now showing patches of gray dust from the stone collapse. His yellow eyes darted around the arena as he tried to understand how the human had managed to bring down such a massive structure, but his confusion was interrupted by Jake's voice calling out from across the arena floor. "The thing about humans," Jake said, his voice carrying clearly in the sudden silence that followed the rockfall, "is that we've learned to make the universe work for us instead of against us?" Crixval responded with a roar of rage and launched himself toward Jake's new position. But his path took him directly over the metal debris field that Jake had so carefully arranged during his preparation period. As the Zephyrian champion's weight came down on a specific piece of curved hull plating, the improvised leva system that Jake had created activated with mechanical precision. The hull plating acted as a fulcrum, magnifying the force of Crixval's landing and transferring that energy through a series of interconnected metal pieces that Jake had positioned like components in a massive machine. A large section of engine housing, balanced on a carefully placed pivot point, swung upward with tremendous force and caught the alien warrior in the chest. The impact sent Crixval flying backward through the air, his massive form tumbling end over end before splashing down in the largest of the arena's 3 water pools. The Zephyrian champion struggled to regain his footing in the shallow water, his natural armor providing excellent protection against physical attacks but offering no assistance in maintaining balance on the slippery stone bottom of the pool. Crixval thrashed in the water. Jake activated the final and most complex element of his trap system. During his preparation period, he had spent hours modifying the arena's ancient drainage network, repositioning stones and clearing blocked channels to create a water redirection system that would activate under the right conditions. Those conditions had now been met. Jake pulled on a length of rope that he had woven from fabric strips torn from old equipment covers, materials that had been present in the arena and were therefore legal to use according to the ancient rules. The rope was connected to a carefully balanced stone that Jake had positioned to block one of the main drainage channels, and when that stone moved, it triggered a cascade of water flow changes throughout the arena's underground system. The 3 water pools, which had existed in peaceful isolation for thousands of years, suddenly became part of a single flowing system as Jake's modifications redirected their outlets through a network of hidden channels. Water began flowing rapidly from the smaller pools toward the large pool where Crixval was struggling to stand, creating a powerful current that swept the alien warrior off his feet. The Zephyrian champion found himself caught in an artificial river that Jake had created using nothing more than stone repositioning and an understanding of fluid dynamics. The current was not deep enough to drown him, but it was strong enough to prevent him from gaining the stable footing he needed to climb out of the water and resume his attack. Crixval's claws, so effective at rending metal and flesh, proved useless against the smooth stone surfaces that Jake had exposed by redirecting the water flow. Every time the alien warrior tried to pull himself out of the current, his claws would slip on the wet stone and he would be swept back into the center of the artificial stream. The spectators in the galleries above watched in stunned silence as they witnessed something unprecedented in the arena's long history. For the first time, a combatant had turned the arena itself into a weapon, using engineering principles and careful preparation to defeat an opponent who possessed overwhelming physical advantages. Jake stood at the edge of the water system he had created, holding the rope that controlled the flow and watching as his opponent struggled helplessly against the current. The Zephyrian champion was not seriously injured, but he was completely neutralized, unable to use any of his natural weapons or superior strength against the forces that held him trapped. "Yield," Jake called out, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had achieved total control over the situation. "You cannot win against the arena itself, and I can maintain this water flow indefinitely." Crixvol's struggles gradually subsided as he realized the futility of his position. The alien warrior had spent his entire life training for combat against other living opponents, but he had never encountered an enemy who could turn the very ground beneath his feet into a weapon. His tactical mind, trained to analyze weaknesses in organic opponents, was useless against the mechanical systems that Jake had created. The Zephyrian champion raised one clawed hand above the water in the universal gesture of surrender, his yellow eyes showing a mixture of defeat and grudging respect for the human's unconventional approach to combat. The arena fell silent except for the sound of flowing water as thousands of spectators tried to process what they had just witnessed. The chief arbitrator's voice boomed across the arena with what sounded like amusement. "Victory to the human representative. The challenge is satisfied according to the ancient laws." Jake released the rope that controlled the water flow, allowing the drainage system to return to its normal configuration. Within minutes, the water level in Crixvol's pool dropped enough for the alien warrior to climb out, though he moved slowly and kept his claws sheathed in a gesture of respect for his conqueror. "Amy," Carter's voice came through Jake's communication device, barely audible over the growing noise from the spectator galleries. "Jake, the galactic news networks are calling this the most innovative arena victory in recorded history. You've just changed the way every species in the galaxy thinks about human capabilities." As Jake walked toward the arena exit, he passed close to Crixvol, who had regained his footing near the edge of the water. The Zephyrian warrior spoke in his own language, and Jake's translator rendered the words in clear English. "I have learned much about human nature today. Your species fights wars that we do not even recognize as battles." Jake nodded respectfully to his former opponent. "We learned long ago that the strongest weapon is often the one your enemy doesn't know exists until it's too late." The arena. Doors closed behind Jake as he entered the exit tunnel, leaving behind a battlefield that would be studied by military strategists and engineers throughout the galaxy for generations to come. Humanity had secured its place in the galactic community not through superior firepower or physical strength, but through the application of intelligence, creativity, and the fundamental human belief that any problem could be solved with enough careful thought and preparation. In the observation galleries above, representatives from dozens of species were already composing reports to their home governments about the implications of what they had witnessed. The humans, it seemed, were going to be far more interesting neighbors than anyone had anticipated.